All right, it being 2 o'clock, welcome to the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator's National Roadworthiness Baseline Survey Industry Information Session. Just some housekeeping first up. For those that are new to this software, and I certainly am, there's a tab on the right-hand button on the right-hand side that allows you to open the PowerPoint presentation up in its own window. I'd recommend that. It's a lot more exciting than I am. And there's also a sidebar that allows you to ask questions. By all means, please make use of that. We'll stop between the sections of the presentation and take a couple of questions, take some more at the end. Any questions we don't get to during the presentation that aren't covered by the material, we will either address that through our FAQ, we'll update that, answer via email, or again, if it's in the slides, we're probably happy enough that that ticks it off. All right, let's get into it. We'll work through probably from the top level and work down into the detail through the presentation. The 3 sections we'll cover off. Firstly, the context, the roadworthiness program. Then we'll get into why we're doing NRBS, and then finally what the National Roadworthiness Baseline Survey will mean in practical terms on the roadside. All right. So these presentations we'll cover through today are built directly off the training slides that we provided to the inspectors from the jurisdictions. I'm a big believer in the value of transparency. As I mentioned, we'll publish these slides as quickly as we can, hopefully by the end of the week, and we'll also upload the video of this webinar and hopefully a trimmed down version for those that don't want to watch the video in its entirety. So what is the National Heavy Vehicle Roadworthiness Program? We were asked by state and federal transport ministers through the TIC process to accelerate a program of work to improve the delivery of roadworthiness for heavy vehicles in Australia. What does that mean? We've got 8 projects in total, the first of which has already been delivered by our Vehicle Safety and Performance team, which is the National Heavy Vehicle Inspection Manual. We then look at inspection competencies. Who can deliver an assessment of the roadworthiness of a vehicle? Inspection types, what work they will do to deliver it. We look at roadworthiness criteria. Upon finding an issue with the vehicle or some other item of concern, how do we respond? Do we need to deal with that on a vehicle-by-vehicle basis, or is it a broader problem that needs us to engage in education? Or is it something that's a pattern of issues around one particular industry, one particular vehicle? How do we deal with that? The big deliverable for this package of work is a recommendation to TIC in November 2017 for a nationally consistent risk-based roadworthiness management framework. Assuming that we get the endorsement of the Transport Ministers, and I'm optimistic that we will, it will then be rolled out subsequent to that. Nothing suddenly, that everything here will be progressively implemented in a very controlled manner. There will be no surprises. We will liaise both with industry and with our partners in the jurisdictions to make sure this happens in a very controlled, managed manner. So what is the National Roadworthiness Baseline Survey and why are we doing it? So it's going to be the largest and most comprehensive assessment of the mechanical condition of the fleet ever undertaken. We're looking at an intensive inspection of around 9,000 vehicles, primarily done by a roadside intercept. At the core of that inspection will be a roller brake test of every axle on every vehicle or combination we intercept. On top of that will be an intensive visual inspection. We're calling it an intensive visual inspection with escalation. So if the inspectors find an item that they believe requires further investigation, whether that means going to hand tools, measuring devices, then they are encouraged to do so. That means that we won't be breaking down every combination to measure kingpin wear, but during the pilots with TMR, there was a vehicle where in the course of a tug test, it revealed an area of concern to the inspectors. They broke that combination down and it found excessive kingpin wear and excessive fifth wheel jaw wear. And that's a good example of how we want that process to work. What does it give us? It will give us a tremendous pool of data around the condition of the fleet as it operates day by day. The data we currently receive from the jurisdictions is not aligned into one comparable data set. We can't take the inspections that are performed in Victoria and compare them to the inspections that are being performed in Queensland and make any real judgment around the condition of the fleet. The operational data is very important to us, but it tells us a lot more about the nature of the inspections, the nature of the operations that are being performed, rather than the condition of the fleet itself that we're looking at. Without that data, without a pool of data that tells us about the state of the fleet, it's very hard for us to make a risk-based or an evidence-based approach to managing vehicle roadworthiness. It'll allow us to compare the condition of fleet across risk factors. It'll allow us to compare existing inspection regimes. That we have some jurisdictions that run very intensive inspection regimes. We have other jurisdictions that run relatively hands-off inspection regimes. Importantly, it'll provide us with a benchmark for assessing our own performance. So we roll out our reforms post-November 2017. This will give us data about how we went. Did we succeed? Did we make the situation better? When and where? The overwhelming majority of these NRBS inspections will be performed via a roadside intercept commencing on the 1st of August, so that's Monday. We anticipate this will be completed in around 9 weeks, which takes us through to the end of September, where this is being delivered by our jurisdictional partners, so by the inspection service providers in each jurisdiction, TMR inside of Queensland, RMS in New South Wales, VicRoads in Victoria and so on. They're determining how and where we roll out the survey inspections in collaboration with our survey partners. Pretty nice point to talk about the survey partner. This is a research project. This is not a compliance enforcement exercise. We are very much focused on creating that data set. We've engaged a market research company to coordinate, collate, analyse and report on that data. We anticipate that we will release a report from our survey partner in January 2017, looking at what were the significant findings of the work, what risk factors were identified, what industry segments, what the significance of time of day, these sorts of questions will be addressed. Additionally, we'll retain that data set and be able to compare it across to other data sets. Looking back, New South Wales has done very similar work historically. We'll be able to compare what they've found over the last 26, 27 years against what we found when we took that survey national. We anticipate that we will probably repeat this work most likely in around 3 years' time. The goal of the broader program is to raise the standards and consistency of the data we collect through day-to-day operations. So it's likely that either in 2019 or possibly into 2022, we will look to run a small survey to validate that our operational data still matches up with what we're finding in our NRBS data, and at that point it will no longer be necessary to do this sort of intensive survey. But as it stands at the moment, the operational data doesn't tell us enough about the condition of the fleet. So who's involved? So we're coordinating the survey, but the delivery of it, we're overseeing the survey. The delivery of it is coordinated by AMR, our survey partner. The operational side, the inspections on the roadside, organising the inspectors when they are there, how they get there is managed by each jurisdiction. They'll be performed around the country. We're still working with Northern Territory and WA. We've got some challenges there around timing, amongst other things, around the Northern Territory election. But we've had excellent support from those jurisdictions. We're continuing to work through those. There will also be inspectors who travel between jurisdictions. So there'll be staff from one state who travel to another state to assist in the delivery of this survey. I think it's a really excellent initiative that will help to build on national consistency around delivery of inspections. And that's something I'd certainly like to see more of into the future. I already spoke earlier that the National Heavy Vehicle Inspection Manual is part of our program of work that was already delivered in December of 2015 and implemented in all the participating jurisdictions for the 1st of July, and we're working very closely with Western Australia and Northern Territory to get it across the line there. This is a tremendously powerful initiative for us. This is the first time that we're all speaking the same language when we talk about faults identified in the course of an inspection. This allows us to take data out of whether they're roadside intercept inspections, facility inspections, and compare it. Will allow us to see patterns of faults. We can see, for example, one particular make and model of truck is massively overrepresented for a particular fault code. Up to date, we haven't been recording data in a compatible way, and it's made it almost impossible to do comparison between jurisdictions. It's made it very hard to look at trends in the data. Introducing the National Heavy Vehicle Inspection Manual gives us a common language. It's the first time we all speak the same language. I cannot recommend highly enough to industry to pick this up and incorporate it into your day-to-day business practices. If you're a workshop manager and you've got your own in-house systems, this is the language you should be using to record faults that are found either in a daily start check or as part of an inspection of the vehicle. If you're a provider of accreditation systems or software, workshop management software, this is the language we want you to be talking. This is how the data will come in from the jurisdictions. If we can get both the maintenance half of the industry and the compliance side all talking the same language, everything improves. Our efficiency improves. We have less confusion over what the fault was being described. We can start to pull data from the maintenance side. If we can have industry associations, fleets, providers of this software saying, hey, look, we've seen a pattern of fault. We're seeing a whole bunch of issues around a particular brake actuator on a particular vehicle or a coupling type that is overrepresented. This is how we start to deliver that co-regulatory model. If you haven't already read it, you can find the NHVM in its current version at nhvr.gov.au/NHVM. Have a read, build it into your business practices. It's the language we will use going forwards. To that end, it is the language we use in the National Roadworthiness Baseline Survey. The faults that are found will be recorded against the reasons for rejection as they exist in the NHVM. I'll flag now, the NHVM doesn't dictate to you an inspection process. It's just the language we use to describe what we find when we undertake an inspection. So, for example, in brake testing, it gives you 4 different options for brake testing. You can have roller brake testing, skid plate brake testing, decelerometer brake testing, and brake testing by measuring a stopping distance. We're not saying you have to do all 4, but if you were to have done one of those tests and found one of the reasons for rejection, that allows us to see which test was performed and what the outcome of that test was if it was unacceptable. So, yeah, very big part of what we're doing both in the baseline survey and moving forwards. So the survey management process, as I said, we oversee it. That the coordination is then managed by our survey partner, AMR. They will take the data that comes out of the individual inspections. They will review it. They'll provide us periodic updates during the survey to let us know how we're trending towards capturing the sample we're looking to capture. They will provide to us a report, which we look to publish in January of 2017, looking at risk factors around heavy vehicle roadworthiness. Also, they'll provide to us the raw data, and that will be very powerful. We're looking to have that as a longitudinal research data set that we can firstly compare in likely 2019 and then hopefully into operational data primarily beyond that, but also to look back to compare to what we're seeing in the New South Wales compliance surveys going back to 1990 and also across to in-service data. When we look at what we found on a roadside intercept basis, how does that compare to what we find when we look at present for inspection different clearance inspections or periodic inspections in those jurisdictions that have them? It gives us a really powerful way to assess both the condition of the fleet and also our existing assurance practices. That's actually probably a nice, that takes us to the end of the context, talking around really about the rest of the program and how the baseline survey fits into it. Will all jurisdictions kick off on the 1st of August? Really good question. No, is the very short answer on that one. We've got some challenges in WA, very straight up and down here. That relates to the availability of sufficient roller brake testers to deliver the survey. We're working to resolve those. The second one is the Northern Territory. We've got some challenges there, both on, it's a very low population. This means we've got some challenges of how we deliver the survey, and they have an election on the 28th of August, I believe, and there's concerns around delivering it during that caretaker period. It's likely that if we get everything in place, we'll look at probably mid-September at the earliest in the Northern Territory, and we will continue forwards until we get the sample that we're chasing. Western Australia, we're working very closely with Department of Transport, Main Roads, and WAPOL to look at a pilot fairly shortly, and we'll kick off hopefully, and again we'll keep everyone updated on this around the 1st of September, but that will be pending resolving those equipment issues. Question was, will there be periodic updates from each jurisdiction? They'll provide, we're expecting probably weekly updates back from, I'll provide that information to the survey partner, the survey partner collates it, will provide it back to us. We're looking at probably weekly updates to us. We will continue surveying until we get the sample we need. So if we have issues with weather or issues with equipment, we will just keep working through until we capture that sample. I'm cautious around how we talk about this survey. I don't want to release raw numbers because the very natural story that tends to fall out of that tends to be focused in the negative. And I'm not looking for this to become an opportunity to kick the industry. I think there's a number of really excellent operators out there, and when there's a article in broader media that says this number of defects were issued, it tends, the fact that some number were defected, the fact that the overwhelming majority may not have been defected or may have only had minor issues tends to get lost in that noise. So we'll be very careful around the information we release. Question on whether the vehicles will be captured as part of an annual inspection. A really good question. There's 3 blocks in the survey. The first is the majority of the survey, which is a roadside intercept-based inspection of goods carrying vehicles. The second is a present for inspection-based survey of bus, coach, plant and SPV vehicles. So we're looking at concrete pumps, drill rigs, those sorts of vehicles. We're not looking to chase down earth-moving construction equipment. So if you've got a wheeled excavator that operates on the road with a conditional registration, we're not interested. We're looking for vehicles which have a substantial road travel mode. Finally, there's another sample, which is this supplementary present for inspection sample, which is that first block, the goods carrying vehicles, trucks, semi-trailers, big animals, road trains, on a present for inspection basis. That makes up around 7% of the total sample. So you're looking, I think nationally it's about 400 of on the numbers there for the supplementary present for inspection. No, I'll take that on. Take that as a question on notice there, but around 7% of the total sample. How we get access to those vehicles for the supplementary present for inspection sample has been left to the jurisdictions, where they're able to build on an existing inspection requirement. So vehicles that are already being presented for inspection for defect clearance or for periodic inspection, we're very eager to make use of that. That's very good for everyone. That makes it easier for the jurisdictions. It doesn't create a new inspection task for them. It's good for the operators because we can add the elements of the inspection that are unique to the baseline survey on top of an existing inspection. And we're probably talking, maybe it's another 5 minutes of work or another 10 minutes on top of the existing inspection. So we kill 2 birds with 1 stone. There's a question that came up in the FAQ with regards to, if I have a NRBS inspection, does that count as a periodic inspection in those jurisdictions that have them? We put that question to the jurisdictions. I haven't been advised that any jurisdictions have taken that option up now, but we will follow up and see whether that has been taken up. But at this stage, I would say probably not, except where our inspections are being provided. We have a total of 6, I think that is, 6 categories of vehicles. Rigid truck. Now, rigid truck includes a rigid truck towing a single trailer or any trailer with or without a trailer. Semi-trailer, B-double, road train. Road train would include a rigid truck towing 2 or more trailers, so a body and 2, for example. We get a number of those in the Northern Territory particularly. A bus and coach sample and a plant sample. As I said, the bus, coach and plant will primarily be captured via the present for inspection model. That said, if the vehicles are available and are intercepted through the present for inspection sample, with the exception of bus and coaches with passengers, we're happy to capture them then. It's just seen as unlikely that we'll get the number of vehicles that we need in particularly the plant and SPV sample on an intercept basis, that not enough of those will drive past the sites we're able to intercept them. These numbers are delivered out of registration, so that's how we've arrived at that sample. We uploaded on Friday both the original advice we received from our statisticians and the updated advice we sought from them after some feedback from the jurisdictions around some issues, particularly around the mix between road trade and B-doubles in Northern Territory and WA, and also evaluating whether we needed to split into metropolitan, non-metropolitan samples in Northern Territory and Tasmania. As far as the Australian Bureau of Statistics is concerned, there is no metropolitan regions inside of Northern Territory or Tasmania, so we've removed those samples, which shrunk the total sample size in those jurisdictions. In total, this works out to around 1.7% of the national fleet. That's 8,270 vehicles out of the 550 odd thousand motor vehicles over 4.5 tonne registered in Australia. So this slide should cover the samples in each region. With the exception of the ACT, Northern Territory and Tasmania, we have a metropolitan and non-metropolitan sample, and then that's broken down into those 6 vehicle categories, giving us the splits by region, by vehicle type. The goal here is to ensure that we can report against the significance of, are vehicles operating in metropolitan areas, more likely or less likely to have defects than a vehicle operating in a remote and regional area. Look at comparisons between states, comparisons between vehicle categories. As I say, the source of those numbers is registration data, and that's been analysed and assessed by our statisticians to come up with those samples to ensure that we end up being able to draw statistically valid inferences out of the data. So this next slide covers our anticipated duration of the inspections. This is the first time this has been done on a national basis. Very similar work has been performed by Transport for New South Wales and RMS on a mostly triennial basis going back to about 1990. That gives us really interesting data, but it's only on vehicles operating in New South Wales. We've taken the numbers from their 2012 and 2015 compliance surveys and used those to calculate how long we think inspections are likely to last. The long and the short of it is that smaller vehicles and compliant vehicles, the duration will be shorter. Larger vehicles and vehicles with defect, particularly multiple defects, the duration will be longer. And that comes from that visual inspection plus escalation, that as you find fault, the time it takes to look into the detail of that fault, understand what's going on. You just see an oil leak, we're looking to understand what needs to be recorded so that we can track the resolution of that defect. It just adds to the time. It's probably important to flag here, the New South Wales compliance survey is a complete compliance survey. They're looking at load restraint, fatigue, dimensions, licensing. We are only focused on the narrow. We're only focused on the mechanical condition of the vehicle. So it's not a mandatory requirement to check logbooks, to check load restraint, to perform a full measure and weigh on the vehicle. We anticipate that will reduce the duration of the inspection. So these numbers from New South Wales, it should be shorter than that, but we don't have a robust data source to tell us the size of that reduction. So we're preferring to err on the side of caution and use those numbers. The long and the short of it, if you're having to try to estimate the likely impact, probably the key take-home message is about 1.7% of the fleet, so something about a 1 in 60 chance of being intercepted and around a 45-minute average duration of inspection. As I said earlier, we will continue surveying until we get to these quotas. These times are the actual inspection times. So this is the time that the vehicle should be stopped at an inspection site. On top of that, we have additional time for travel, for set up, for pack down for the inspectors. This is just the component of the survey that impacts upon industry. As I touched on earlier, there's 3 blocks. There's roadside intercept-based surveys, and that makes up the majority of the total sample. That's rigid truck, semi-trailer B-double road train in that metropolitan, non-metropolitan sample. Additionally to that, there's a present for inspection survey for bus, coach, plant and SPV. And then finally, we have a supplementary present for inspection running around 7% of the total sample, which is that first category, the goods carrying effectively categories, but done on a booked basis. The elegant part here is that gets us just a different slice of industry. There are some vehicles, because of either where they operate, the times of day they operate, whatever it happens to be, that means we're less likely to see them on the roadside. By taking a different cut through, we get data that tells us whether the intercept sample is representative of the population as a whole, or whether it's getting skewed by where we're undertaking those inspection operations. Mention again there the existence of the visiting authorised officer scheme. It's entirely possible that you'll see on the roadside inspectors from one jurisdiction in an NHVR vest working in another jurisdiction. I think that's tremendous in terms of building national consistency around the conduct of these inspections. I think that's a really positive step. On those roadside intercept surveys, jurisdictions around the sites, lots of these sites will be familiar to you. A lot of them will be the sites where compliance activities are generally undertaken. Some of them are new. We're looking to try to maximise the difference in the number of sites we can capture to get the best possible representation of the population. So there's a number of new sites. I'd like to thank the jurisdictions for the efforts they've undertaken to find these sites. It's not an easy task to find somewhere where you can intercept a vehicle, undertake this sort of work. And it's going to be very interesting, particularly trying to capture that metropolitan sample. It's very challenging to have an intercept site in a metropolitan area. We tend to build them on major freight routes between major cities because of simple real estate reasons. So I really look forward to seeing that metropolitan data as it rolls through. The next sample is that present for inspection sample. This is bus, coach, plant, SPV. As I said, not interested in earth-moving, agricultural and construction equipment. It's got to have a substantial road travel mode. So I would say, as an example, a Franna crane that runs around between sites day in, day out, that's in. A tractor towing cane bins between one property and the next, we're not interested in it. The slice of vehicle standards that relate to that vehicle makes it very challenging. There is future work coming in that space, national notices around agricultural equipment, and they will look more closely at what standards we expect for agricultural equipment when they have access to the road network and how that's managed. But our focus through this is primarily around those vehicles with a substantial road travel mode. Is the supplementary present for inspection. I probably touched on this one enough that there is around 7% of the goods carrying vehicle samples, truck, semi-trailer and so on, that we'll be capturing on a present for inspection basis. This is being managed by the jurisdictions, and for the most part we'll probably rely on existing inspection triggers, defect clearance inspections, periodic annual inspections, passenger transport, more bus and coach inspections. Very good ones here. We'll touch on this a bit in this next section. There's questions around will we be undertaking the sort of subsequent enforcement activities on the faults that are found. Our guidance to the inspection services, to the jurisdictions, is we're focused on the research data. If they identify faults that they believe require defects to be issued, prosecutions to be undertaken, vehicles to be grounded, that should be handled upon the completion of the survey in line with normal jurisdictional process. So we're not going to allow vehicles that we believe should be grounded to continue to operate simply because they were found through this process. But we're also not directing the jurisdictions to do anything they wouldn't do any other day of the week in that space. And that's our general guidance for a lot of these operational issues, that this is nothing new. We've been undertaking roadside compliance activities in Australia for decades through the jurisdictions, and those processes continue. We're just using those processes to deliver a body of research work. All right, a few of those get answered during the next section. I might touch on a few of them at the end as well. Will special permit vehicles and combinations be part of the sample? Absolutely. If they are the next vehicle if they are selected for their NRBS inspection, they will be inspected. No exemptions for any particular categories. We want to know about every vehicle that's out there operating on the road. There's been some really significant work in this space, particularly in RMS, New South Wales, on looking at compliance of oversize over mass movements in the last sort of 18 months, 2 years. Everyone in every vehicle is inside of the purview of the HVNL. We will capture everyone that we can. They're part of that data set. There's a few more that I will cover. Thank you there. I'll make sure that I tick them off when I get to the end, but we'll work through the next section. I think it answers a lot of these, and they're all very good questions. All right. I'll roll on. If we can push that next slide, which talks of selecting vehicles at intercept sites. So there's two means by which we'll be selecting vehicles for the intercept-based sample. The first one is static selection at intercept sites. What we've asked for the inspectors to do in order to capture a random sample is what we're calling continuous inspection, that upon completing the NRBS inspection of previous vehicle, that vehicle is released. The next vehicle over 4.5 tonnes GVM that drives past, we select for inspection. I've had questions on whether we're going to capture NHVRS vehicles and other vehicles in compliance. We absolutely want that data. It would be the worst case outcome would be to not get enough vehicles inside of those schemes to be able to draw statistically valid inferences about the performance of those schemes. This is really valuable data to us. I've been asked about, will we be targeting large fleets, small fleets? There will be no targeting. The instruction is continuous selection. Release the previous vehicle, capture the next vehicle. There's some issues that come up around management of the sites. So, for example, if either a vehicle or enough vehicles are grounded to make the site unable to continue to perform inspections, there's no space left, that will be managed in line with normal jurisdictional practice. So if the normal practice is to direct vehicles to the next safe place to stop, that will be undertaken. If the normal practice is to simply cease work, they will cease work in line with their normal management procedures. We'll be having no queuing. That is, if there's sites that use, say, selected signage and multiple vehicles are selected, the first vehicle that comes into the site is selected for inspection. The other vehicles are released and sent back on their way. Where sites, particularly RMS, through a number of their heavy vehicle safety stations, have risk-based filtering lanes to select vehicles, whilst those sites are undertaking NRBS inspections for the purpose of selecting for NRBS, they are to be turned off. They will not be using risk-based filtering. It is a slice of the entire population, not a slice assessed on risk. We're not looking to target individual industries, operators, vehicles. It's important to us that we get the best data possible because it improves the effectiveness and efficiency of the work we do into the future. The other method, so we'll just push the next slide, which talks about selecting vehicles by mobile intercepts. There are some jurisdictions who have inspection sites that don't lend themselves to intercept-based inspection at that site. They're just back from the freight route. In those cases, they will be using mobile intercepts. So upon releasing the previous vehicle, a radio call most likely, they will then intercept the next vehicle over 4.5 tonnes, direct it for the inspection, and that's the same process to ensure that we get that random sample. What we do not want, and we've certainly briefed very strongly against to the jurisdictions to make sure we don't get a targeted sample. We want the best possible representative slice across the industry that we can get. All right, we can roll that next one. I should mention here again, these are the training slides we use to deliver this to the jurisdictions. We're very strong on transparency in delivering this project. If this isn't what's being delivered, let us know. The inspection procedure. We released, I think it was Friday last week, a document called the Inspection Procedure Overview. It's intended as a brief one-page summary of the inspection that we're seeking to have performed. As I've described, that's roller brake test, except where it's not safe to do so, so vehicles that are either too wide or too heavy on individual axles to be able to roller brake test. we'll be using shaker plates. Northern Territory flag, they don't use their shaker plates. We're happy to accommodate that. But roller brake testing, shaker plates, plus an intensive visual inspection of the entire combination. We don't require that the vehicle be over pits or a hoist. We're not requiring that combinations be broken down. Where through the likes of a tug test or a visual assessment, inspectors have concern over condition of a coupling, and it's safe to do so and in line with their jurisdictional workplace health and safety management procedures, we can and they will split combinations up to directly measure coupling wear, but they're not obliged to break them down in every inspection. Yeah, that inspection procedure overview, which you can find on the National Roadworthiness Baseline Survey website, www.nhvr.gov.au/NRBS, outlines what we've asked the jurisdictions to do. As I mentioned earlier, we aren't looking for a mandatory check of logbooks, load restraint, dimension, mass, but if the jurisdictional staff, if the inspectors, authorised officers, during the course of a NRBS inspection have grounds for concern, they're looking at a vehicle and saying, look, I'm not happy with how that load's restrained, or I'm concerned about how tired that driver appears to be, then our request is that upon completion of the baseline survey, they undertake any of the additional compliance activities they believe are necessary in that case, but it's not a mandated part of the baseline survey. We can probably actually slide through. I should apologise there, I should have gone through. We might slide forwards. Yeah, the next two slides probably just covered by what I was just discussing. I do apologise, I don't have it up in front of me. We might slide forward through to defect categories. So, a bit of a challenge here. Western Australia and Northern Territory, being non-HVNL jurisdictions, do not have the existing categorisation of defects that we use in the HVNL. We've got formal warning, minor, major, and a subset of major called grounded, which is a major defect where the condition of use is it not be used at all. What we've done is we've provided guidance to those jurisdictions on how defects would be classified in that system, and they'll be recording the data into our survey form as though they were using those categories. But still obviously issuing any defects they issue in their normal jurisdictional systems. A bit of a challenge there. Moving forwards, I think we need to develop a language around what we find in inspections that's about the severity of the fault, rather than talking in terms of what administrative processes through a defect notice that we might use to resolve it. And that will undoubtedly come out in the remainder of the roadworthiness program. I mean, Northern Territory and WA in their defect categorisation isn't far off. It's really just they don't have that separation between minor and major. We just need to provide guidance to them around how those decisions are made. What changes can we expect once the results have been compiled and the outcome is known? So this body of work informs a few of our projects. Risk-based inspection criteria, which is the recommendations to tick in November of 2017. The other one I'll probably provide a lot of guidance to is what's called our roadworthiness criteria project, which looks at when we find a technical issue, what's our response? Should we be issuing a defect notice? Should we be undertaking industry training? Is there education? What's the best way to not just fix the issue on that one vehicle? That's a very challenging approach, but rather understand why that issue occurred. If it's occurring broadly across the fleet, how we solve it for the broader fleet. This will tell us what issues are out there. What are we dealing with? Is it regional? Is it national? Is it about particular industries? Have we got something around corrosion in a particular industry that we need to say to them, look, as an industry, you need to come back to us and look at how you can better manage this? Very much focused on a co-regulatory model. We will go to the industry associations, we'll go to the representatives, we'll go to the operators themselves and say, this is what we're seeing. Does it align with what you see in your maintenance space? It's falling short of our expectations in terms of the condition of the vehicles as they're being used. What can you do from your side to improve that? What can we do to assist and facilitate that? It's far more effective, efficient and desirable that we deliver this through a co-regulatory model than by what tends to be very sort of hand-fisted hard regulation. Co-regulation is the vision we see for the future. When will we find out the results? We expect the results will be published in January 2017, and we'll release that report publicly. In the interest of transparency, we're not looking to have that withheld. We want the industry to see what we're seeing when we do this work. And I think that's...
I have another question, Adam. We've got another question about security seals. If security seals are removed as part of this inspection, will new seals be installed prior to the vehicle's departure? Will the driver receive any written material stating that the original seals were removed for the purpose of this inspection?
Now, this mostly comes into play for containers, I believe, and again, this is not my special area of expertise. Short answer would be in line with normal jurisdictional practice. I would not expect that we would need to open containers or sealed loads. I know, for example, when they're shipping tobacco products, they'll tend to have security seals on the backs of Pantex for that. Given we're not assessing load restraint, it would only be in the special case where for some reason the inspector believed there was a need for escalation that I would anticipate we'd open them. With regards to replacement of seals, that would just be by normal jurisdictional practice. I'm not across what that is and whether that's consistent currently. In terms of documentation, that's probably when we'll get to it. I might roll on. I'll cover that in a moment, and we'll touch on it at the end if there's any other questions on it. Inspection of SPV and plant vehicles, wonderful. That's the slide we've got. We don't believe it's likely we will manage to capture the SPV and plant vehicle sample on an intercept basis. It's not enough of them pass through our intercept sites. They're not set up to accommodate vehicles which are often over width. Generally, lots of them are over mass as well. So we're looking to work with industry, working with industry bodies, the Concrete Pumping Association of Australia, SECA, the crane industry counts. Anyway, I apologise there, Brandon. And similar bodies to work at how best we can make use of existing facilities and particularly depots to provide those inspections. It's by far and away preferable to us that we inspect those vehicles in their depots when they're otherwise having downtime to make use of those, because we don't believe we'll get enough of them on the intercept sample. They are still eligible to be captured on an intercept basis. So if a concrete pump crane, as the easy two examples, is driving past an intercept site and is selected on that random continuous selection basis, they will be inspected. But we don't anticipate we'll get them. Where it's not possible to run the vehicle over the roller brake tester, that will not take place. We'll still inspect the rest of the vehicle. They'll still be in for the purpose of the sample. We just won't be able to perform that roller brake test. And width is generally the biggest issue there. I think the most common roller brake tester is limited to about 2.7 metres overall width. And given the number of these cranes that are 3 metres and 3.2 metres, that means it's just not feasible to do so. And certainly I'm optimistic. I look forward to seeing the data we get out of that SPV and plant sample. They've got a number of really excellent industry schemes. I'm looking to see the performance of those schemes. All right, next slide. Communicating with the driver. As I touched on earlier, these slides are the slides we used in our training with the jurisdictions. We've trimmed them down on their training for the inspectors around delivery of the baseline survey. It was a full day of training. We've only got 45 minutes to an hour here today, but they will advise the drivers that they're being selected for a baseline survey inspection. They'll flag that the average duration of these inspections is around 45 minutes. They'll be provided at the start of the inspection with what we're calling nerves on a page. It's a one-page summary you can find on find on our website that summarises what the baseline survey is, if they're not already aware. Once the inspection is complete, if requested to do so, the authorised officers and its fatigue regulated vehicle will record in the work diary that they were intercepted for a NRBS inspection in line with normal practice for recording inspections in work diaries. They'll then be provided with an inspection record that records that when and where they were selected and what vehicle was selected, and that will stay with the vehicle. And I'll touch on that in just a moment. On the flip side of that, we've also got a one-page version of the FAQ. You can find the FAQ on our website if you haven't had a read. It's a good summary. I was really impressed to see it stuck up in a few transport depots around the place that I've been dealing with, and that's a really positive step, just to give everyone in the supply chain some visibility that, you know, during this 9-week window, it's possible that vehicles will be delayed due to this. I might go to the next slide, which should be feedback about NRBS and the inspection. This is just, and this again, same slides we gave to the inspectors. This is just how to provide feedback. Essentially, if you have issues around the conduct of a particular inspector, or there's a complaint around the jurisdictional staff, that should be directed through to their normal feedback mechanisms. So on all their websites, they can provide detail around how to contact the jurisdictions. If it's around the baseline survey itself, you're unhappy about the delay, anything else, send that through to us. That roadworthiness at nhvr.gov.au email address, we'll give that at the end. It's on, I believe, on the website as well. But just that split. If it's about the conduct of the operation, that's for the jurisdictions. If it's about why were they doing that operation in the first place, send that through to me. And we'll respond as best we can. Question that's come up in a few, and this is one I've held back here, if we go to the next slide, is around reinspection. The baseline survey reinspection is based around the motor vehicle. So once a motor vehicle has been inspected, it is exempt from reinspection for the purposes of NRBS for the duration of the baseline survey. So if it has a different driver, the motor vehicle's exempt. The driver, if he hops into another prime mover and goes up down the road, he will be and is selected again. Chances at 1.7% are quite low, but the driver's not exempt. If a trailer is taken off that motor vehicle, put onto another prime mover, that prime mover gets intercepted, the whole vehicle gets inspected again. That slide, I think, covers it adequately, as well, presenting an inspection record to the driver at the time of the inspection. That should stay with the vehicle and will exempt them from reinspection for the duration of NRBS. That doesn't stop them from being intercepted for other purposes. You know, if they're a week later they get pulled over for a logbook check, or they get pulled over to be run across a weighbridge, that will still take place in line with normal practice. They just won't be re-inspected for the purposes of the baseline survey. And that's, we don't want duplication in the data, and it would be a fairly significant inconvenience that I don't want to see to re-inspect the same vehicle again regardless. All right, we'll roll that next slide. If you've got any other questions, there's sort of come up sort of 3 times in the questions. If you've got any other questions on that, be sure to fire them through. Responding to other non-compliance issues. I've touched on this a few times, I won't labour this point, but if during the course of an inspection, the inspector has grounds to be concerned about something else, something that's not inside of the baseline survey, whether that's mass, fatigue, dimensions, load restraint, whatever else it happens to be that's not inside the work we're asking them to do, our request to them is complete the baseline survey work if it's safe to do so, and then deal with those other non-compliance issues. So it's not a free pass, but it's not a required part of the baseline survey. It should only be taking place where they could not in good conscience release that vehicle without taking additional actions. To that note, the next slide there deals with checking the driver's work diary. We're not looking to, it's not a requirement that we work back through the work diary and confirm its compliance. Again, where they've got reasonable grounds to believe it's the case, they are free to do so, but it's not the work we're asking them to do. We've released an information sheet that describes, in the context of the baseline survey, when work should be recorded as work and what it takes to qualify as rest. We've had a number of questions on this. Essentially it boils down to, is it likely there will be 15 minutes of continuous time that qualifies as rest during the inspection? On smaller vehicles, on particularly smaller compliant vehicles, it's probably unlikely. the total duration of the inspection means that from when they finish actively participating in running the vehicle over the roller brake tester and shaker plates, but the time between then and the release means it's not likely they will have 15 minutes of complying rest time. As I said, that guidance material on fatigue that we uploaded to the baseline survey website should give information around what is rest for these purposes. For larger combinations, particularly larger combinations with some or multiple defects, it may be the case that they actually do get to that threshold of 15 minutes continuous rest to be able to record it as such and are free to do so. So it's just in line with the existing HV9 requirements. That's all we're restating there is what is already the law and how that law would apply to a driver that's undergoing a baseline survey inspection. All right. So that brings us very nicely to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for bearing with me. Do we have any additional questions that we haven't covered off? Fire them through now. If you think of something later, firstly have a look at our FAQ. We'll update that on the back of the questions we've been asked today. By all means, at the end of that presentation there, it's got our Roadworthiness email address. Fire your questions through to that. We can respond to you that way. Will we respond via email to questions? Excellent question, and yes, we will. Will we we'll upload the slides, hopefully, well, as soon as we can. It should hopefully be by the end of the week. We'll work to get the video of this session uploaded. We'll hopefully also be able to make a compressed version that just hits the key points. Yes, sorry, that's the big one there. My apologies there. Yeah, we'll send out to everyone that registered for the webinar a survey around the webinar. We want to know, what can I do to provide better information to industry? How did I do today? Let me know. We'll certainly look to incorporate that into future work. Is this a good method of getting information? Do you prefer this? Do you prefer media releases? That's the sort of information we're chasing via that survey. We'll compile those results and try to incorporate them so that we can get information to industry as effectively and efficiently as we can. Any other questions there from my wonderful moderators? We hope to have those up, as I said, the slides for the end of the week, the full video of the presentation as quickly as I can. I'd like to meet that end of the week, but certainly by the end of next week we'll have those up probably to our YouTube channel is probably the likely mechanism we'll use there, and if not, you'll be able to find it from our baseline survey website, the www.nhvr.gov.au/NRBS for National Roadworthiness Baseline Survey. All right, any other questions there? No, we all seem pretty happy. Again, I thank you all for your participation, your patience. We will continue to work with industry associations and industry media to get information out around it. I'm really positive about our ability to work with a number of these industry associations to deliver this work. I appreciate there is a significant impact on industry associated with the baseline survey. We want to make sure that we get value from it, you get value from it, and what we can deliver in future roadworthiness reforms makes this worthwhile. All right. Any questions that we didn't address during the presentation that we sent through already, we will respond either by incorporating it into the FAQs or we'll respond directly to you via email. We'll certainly look to get that information out there. As I've said, we have a lot of information we've put up onto our website, the inspection procedure overview, which is the guidance material, in addition to the training that we provided to the jurisdictions, the survey forms, how the data will be captured. I'll flag again there that hopefully in all, but certainly in the overwhelming majority of cases, we'll be capturing the actual survey data electronically, but the paper forms are our fallback option. It makes it easy for us to show industry what data we're capturing, what it looks like. We've published the advice from our statisticians on the design of the sample, how we set it out to make sure we got a representative slice and we're able to make statistically valid inferences from the data we collected. That's a fair chunk of what the guidance material around fatigue is probably the other one we've pushed out. And that, as I say, that restates the HVNL as it stands. Not just HVNL, sorry, also deals with how fatigue is managed in Northern Territory and in Western Australia. But that's info sheets up there to provide guidance on how fatigue should be handled by fatigue-regulated drivers, should they be part of a NRBS inspection. Probably those key figures again, 1.7% of the fleet, so it means about a 1 in 60 chance of being intercepted. Continuous random selection. We're not targeting any particular operators, industries, combinations. We want the most representative sample we can achieve, and we're working hard behind the scenes to ensure we get that. Around 45 minutes average duration, less if you're compliant, longer if you're non-compliant, less if the vehicle's a smaller vehicle, takes less time to inspect a 2-axle rigid than it does to inspect a 60-metre super quad road train in Western Australia. To the schedulers out there and to everyone else in the supply chain, please be patient with those operators, and for those drivers particularly that are subject to inspection. This is outside of their control. You need to be aware of it. You need to incorporate it into the planning you do. But yeah, please be accommodating it to the largest degree possible. We thank you for your participation and for your patience. Any other questions there? All right, I think we're good from that side. I'll be happy there. All right, in that case, we might wrap up. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll talk to you all again soon, no doubt.